On behalf of Duke University and the Martin Luther King Jr. Celebration Committee, I welcome you to this special commemorative service celebrating the life and legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. This year, due to COVID-19 protocols, participants are in various locations. And though we are apart, today we come together in one spirit to remember and honor this man whose message is still so relevant for our time. Even as we live through the pandemics of a coronavirus, racism, materialism, militarism, and experience political upheaval in this nation, the wisdom of Dr. King rings true. That is, that as he says in his book, Strength to Love, there is some good in the worst of us and some evil in the best of us. So today, we come humbly, seeking what is good for all of God's children. And we begin with what Dr. King often did throughout his prophetic ministry. We pray. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, Thou who hast brought us thus far along the way, we come today like empty pitchers to a full fountain with no merits of our own. Open up a window of heaven as our rejoicing rises high as the listening skies in gratitude for the words, life, and legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. As we gather to remember and to celebrate his dream, we recognize that we are living a nightmare right now because many still don't believe that we exist in an interconnected web of mutuality in which our destinies are tied together. We recognize that there are unfulfilled dreams and shattered dreams because we have not seen the jangling discords of the nation transformed into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood and sisterhood. We acknowledge that we have not yet seen all of God's children joining hands and singing, while we still see people being judged by the color of their skin and not the content of their character. We even confess that at times we have become silent about things that matter, and our silence is a betrayal. Forgive us, O God. Though we confess this truth, we still cry out in hope, Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand, because we still believe in your dream for the world embodied through Dr. King. Even while we lament, we hope. We dream. We dream the impossible dream in recognition that nothing is impossible with you, our Creator. We dream a world of peace, justice, love, and mercy, a world where these virtues would roll down like waters and ever-flowing streams. Give us the courage to hope and to hold fast to dreams, that where there is hatred, we would sow love. Where there is injury, we would sow pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. That we may not so much seek to be consoled as to console. That we may not so much seek to be understood as to understand, that we may not so much seek to be loved as to love. For we know that hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. So give us enough strength to love, that we might not be so pitifully weak enough to hate. Let nothing separate us from your nonviolent power of love, that we might be agents of love in the world, that there might be peace on earth, beginning with us. Amid the nightmarish realities of our current day, may your dream come true. such that earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty, enabling us to face the rising sun of a new day begun as we march on till the victory for all humanity is won. In other words, set us free at last. Make us free at last. Amen.
Sim shalom, tova uvracha ba'olam, chen v'chesed v'rachamim alinu ve'al kol amecha. Grant peace, goodness, and blessing in this world. Grant love and mercy over us and over all your people. Barchinu Avinu, kulanu ke'echad be'or panecha. Bless us, source of being, all of us, as one amid your light. Ki be'or panecha natata lanu Adonai Eloheinu Torat Chaim, ve'avat chesed u'tzedakah uvracha, ve'rachamim v'chaim v'shalom. For by your light, wise one, our God, you give to us Torah of life, and love and kindness, justice, blessing, mercy, life, and peace. Ve'tov be'einecha lefarech et amcha Yisrael, ve'et kol ha'amim be'rov oz v'shalom. So may it be a good thing in your eyes to bless your people Israel and all peoples with abundant strength and peace. Baruch atah Adonai, oseh hashalom. Blessed are you, source of all, maker of peace. Amen.
Shio Nagada, Gigige Dagwadoa, Zitzalagi Nole Aniwodahi Zinela. Hello everyone, my name is Scarlet Guy. I am a member of the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, and my family resides in the Painttown community. I am the Vice President of the Duke Native American Student Alliance, and I would like to acknowledge that I am currently in the homelands of the Cherokee people on the Koala boundary in North Carolina. I would like to welcome you and inform you that Duke University occupies the ancestral lands of the Shakori, Eno, and Tuscarora people. I would also like to acknowledge the indigenous nations that reside in what is currently called North Carolina. The 8 recognized indigenous nations that reside in North Carolina are the Coharie, the Eastern Band of Cherokee, the Halawa-Saponi, the Lumbee, the Meherrin, the Occaneechi-Saponi, the Saponi, and the Wakamasuan. If you do not know whose lands you occupy, I encourage you to find out which indigenous nations were ancestral to the lands you are on, as well as find out which indigenous nations reside in your area. Shki, thank you.
On behalf of the entire Duke community, I am honored to join in this celebration of the life and legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Each year, we gather together to mark this important anniversary and recommit to building a more just and inclusive future. This year, that purpose takes on renewed urgency as we have witnessed continued reminders of daily violence against our Black neighbors and of justice delayed or undone, alongside a pandemic that has been devastating to communities already facing enduring economic and health disparities. In 1964, Duke hosted Dr. King in Page Auditorium amidst a segregated society and the righteous ferment of the civil rights movement. In that speech, Dr. King told the assembled audience that we must overcome, a familiar call to action that still holds particular resonance today as we battle the twin pandemics of racism and COVID-19. With that call in mind, and with the ongoing engagement of our students, faculty, staff, and alumni, Duke has come together to commit to a comprehensive anti-racism initiative, one that we hope will forever change this institution for the better. We hope to ensure that anti-racism and equity remain long-term priorities for Duke, woven carefully into every aspect of our institutional strategy and culture. I am grateful for the contributions of so many of our colleagues as this initiative gets underway, and for the leadership of those pioneers from throughout Duke history who have stood up for what is right and just. So as we join together to remember Dr. King, I once again urge the entire Duke community to come together with the humanity to recognize that we are all people with diverse stories, perspectives, talents, and aspirations. With the humility to recognize that we know a lot less than we like to admit, and we must learn from one another to investigate the hard truths. With the honesty to recognize that unequal life chances shape who we are and often limit who we can become. And perhaps most importantly, with the collective hope in our capacity for change. As I said this fall, we won't always get this right, and we'll make mistakes along the way. But we are committed today and throughout the future of Duke to addressing systemic racism on our campus and setting an example for our nation and the world. Very best wishes to all of you.
I'm Steve Schul, the Mayor of Durham, and I'm grateful to be with you again here today for yet another wonderful celebration at Duke of the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. The theme of today's celebration is Voices of the Movement. And in 2021, in the wake of the cold, racist murder of George Floyd, the voices of justice roar throughout our land. Today, I want to speak to the Duke undergraduates who are listening in, and I want to tell you a personal story about how I found my voice here at Duke and how you can too. Behind me is a photograph from the Duke archives. The time is early 1970, 50 years ago. The place, as you can tell, is the Duke Traffic Circle, and the speaker is then University President Terry Sanford. I chose this photograph because I was in this crowd, a freshman at Duke, because this was a day and an era when I was learning to use my voice for justice right here at Duke, and when hundreds, thousands of my fellow students were as well. Just days before this photograph was taken, President Nixon had widened the Vietnam War by invading Cambodia. 4 students had just been killed during the demonstrations at Kent State, and then 2 more at Jackson State. And so, to protest the war and the killings, we gathered, hundreds of us, in front of the chapel and then marched to the traffic circle to block it and to peacefully shut down business as usual at the university. In contrast to what we saw at the US Capitol recently, and in the spirit of Dr. King, our actions were purposefully nonviolent. Terry Sanford had just arrived at Duke then as the new president, and the photographer snapped this picture as Mr. Sanford spoke to us late in the afternoon in the traffic circle. We continued our demonstrations all over campus that night, and the next day, President Sanford asked the faculty for an extraordinary action. Those of us who wanted to work as activists against the war, or whatever our stance on the conflict, could simply stop going to class for the next 6 weeks of school, for the last 6 weeks of school, take pass-fails in each of our classes, and spend the time in communities working to stop the war. I remember what I did with those weeks. I went to demonstrations in Washington and at Fort Bragg. I cut my hair, it was down to my shoulders, so I considered this a big sacrifice. And I went canvassing door to door in Durham to support the congressional amendments to end the war in Vietnam. I drove up to lobby my Congress members in Washington about the war. In short, I made my voice heard, along with so many other voices of the movement, including the voice of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who had spoken out so eloquently against the war in the last year of his life. That movement here at Duke continued as we fought for improved pay and working conditions for Duke Hospital employees and cafeteria workers, for more African-American faculty members. There were barely a handful in 1970. For equality of admissions to the university between men and women, for admission of more Black students. You can see in the photo just how white and male Duke was in 1970, and so much more. That's how I found my voice and joined it with so many others in the lifelong movement for justice, starting right here at Duke. And you, as Duke undergraduates, can do the same. Find your cause, raise your voice for justice. There is no better place to start than at Duke University in the year 2021. The movement is right outside your door. There has never been a time that we've needed you more.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are the Duke University Amon La Chorus. We are Duke's first and only African choir. As the Duke Amon La Chorus, we use our voices as a method of storytelling. We sing music in a myriad of languages spoken across the entire African continent. Our first song is Tina Sizwe. Tina Sizwe is a Zulu liberation song originating from South Africa. It is one of the most popular anthems of South Africa's fight against apartheid, and it means we Black people are crying for our land, we the disenfranchised people, and our children would like to reclaim our sovereignty, dignity, and self-governance. It is a rally for the marginalized to take back what belongs to them. Thank you. Tina Sizwe. Tina Sizwe. Tina Sizwe. Sikhalela. Sikhalela. Tina Sizwe. Ela tatwa. Ela tatwa.
Good afternoon. I am delighted to bring you greetings on behalf of our Duke Health family. 2020 was a difficult year. It exposed anew the racism in our communities, and we once again witnessed the loss of Black lives due to violent acts, as well as the lives of so many others to a pandemic that disproportionately impacts people of color. Today, in early 2021, we look to the future with abundant hope and abiding purpose, as there is such great need. So as we gather to celebrate the life of Dr. King, it is also a time to lift up our voices, to recommit to and echo his calls for equality, equity, and justice. Dr. King once said, and I quote, "Our lives began to end the day we become silent about things that matter," end of quote. At Duke Health, we certainly are not staying silent. We're moving forward to advance racial, social, and health equity through our Moments to Movement endeavor. bringing people together from different backgrounds and with different points of view. We're encouraging candid conversations about shared experiences of discrimination and resilience. We're re-examining our policies, our educational practices, and our connections with the community to ensure that everyone who interacts with Duke feels valued and respected. We have committed ourselves to achieving equitable health outcomes for all patients, including those who need COVID treatment. And we are working with our community partners to provide vaccinations to some of our most vulnerable citizens. Eradicating racism and ending this pandemic will not happen in a matter of days or weeks. There is no quick fix. At Duke Health, we are committed to the long road ahead. Like Dr. King, we will not rest until we've created lasting, sustainable change. I am honored to participate in this celebration with so many luminaries. Again, on behalf of Duke Health, I add my greetings to those expressed by others. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Toby Akinyelu, co-president of the Black Student Alliance and president of the Kappa Omicron chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated at Duke University. Today we are here to rightfully commemorate an esteemed brother of Alpha Phi Alpha, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a civil rights movement champion and a shining beacon of hope who used his voice to spur our society towards action and to make the United States a more just nation for all people. A fight that continues today as countless leaders offer their voices as rally cries for change. Bryan Stevenson lends his voice and talents to fight injustices within the criminal justice system, especially along radical lines and disparities. Nihad Awad fights for Muslim civil liberties. Tarana Burke empowers survivors and allies to stand against gender violence. Cori Bush, an inspired Ferguson protester, now represents Missouri's 1st congressional district as she fights for criminal justice and police reform, Medicaid for all, and a $15 minimum wage in the U.S. House of Representatives. Black Lives Matter organizers across the nation continue to rise in a call for justice for Black lives in Minneapolis, Louisville, Memphis, Los Angeles, New York City, and in Ferguson. In 2020, we saw uprisings and protests throughout the nation and the world. Those surprised by these protests' nature, where communities have congregated and collaborated to initialize change, have not been listening. Systemic racism has poisoned the Black community since the nation's inception, and those surprised have turned a blind eye to this until the movement could no longer be ignored. And as this gross inequality still exists in the world, their silence speaks volumes. As 2020 showed us, we can no longer afford to be silent. Today, we celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who taught our society the importance of using our voices, gifts, and talents to spark the flame of meaningful and lasting change. Now more than ever, we must not underestimate the power of our voices. Our voice empowers a people, ignites change, conveys passion, spreads knowledge, uplifts humanity. We debate and discuss. We plan and instruct. We inquire and convey. We are able to grow in our intellectual spectrum and social awareness. We are able to spread new ideas and influences from which we can improve our society. It is through our voice that we assemble the like-minded and demand attention from the ignorant to dismantle the weapons of oppression. So I encourage you, just as trailblazers have once done and people among us do now, to find your voice, because one voice can make all the difference.
Hello, Duke community. I am Ariel Powell, a second-year MBA student at the Fuqua School of Business and president of Duke's Black Graduate and Professional Student Association. 2021 continues to demonstrate the need for our voices and collective action to create a more just and equitable nation. This year, we celebrate those from my home state of Georgia who use their voices to dismantle systems of voter suppression and elect Georgia's first Black senator. On the same day, however, we were disheartened by attempts to disrupt our democracy and reminded that we must unite to progress and reconcile with our nation's history in order to create a brighter future. We will face opposition by those who value power over equity. Silence is dangerous, and as Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. demonstrated, our voices and actions are paramount to uplifting others and upholding justice. I'm honored to present our keynote speaker, a pastor, philanthropist, and activist who has dedicated his life's work to propel the voices of those who have been historically underrepresented, underserved, and silenced. This social justice leader continues to fight tirelessly to address our nation's most challenging systemic issues to create a more just, peaceful, and loving community for all. I introduce Reverend Dr. Starsky Wilson. Reverend Dr. Wilson is the president and CEO of the Children's Defense Fund in Washington, D.C., where he advocates for federal, state, and local policies and initiatives to improve the lives of our children. Prior to the Children's Defense Fund, Reverend Dr. Wilson served as president and CEO of Deaconess Foundation, a faith-based grant-making organization supporting child well-being in St. Louis. He is the former pastor of St. Louis's St. John's Church, where he led congregational and community activism to support youth violence prevention, healthcare and Medicaid expansion, public school reform, and voter mobilization. Many may recognize Reverend Dr. Wilson as a frontline leader during the civil outcry in Ferguson, following the tragic police killing of Michael Brown Jr. Reverend Dr. Wilson served as a voice for the Ferguson community and was appointed by Missouri's former governor to co-chair the Ferguson Commission, where he used his voice to initiate institutional policing, child well-being, and economic mobility change. Reverend Dr. Wilson received his bachelor's degree in political science from the illustrious Xavier University of Louisiana and received his Master of Divinity from Eden Theological Seminary. He also represents Duke's Black grad community as he received his Doctor of Ministry from Duke University. He's the husband of Dr. Latoya Smith Wilson and a father to 4 children. His work continues to inspire us and serves as a beacon of light as our nation moves towards healing, racial equity, and social justice. We are blessed to welcome and hear words from a voice of the movement. Reverend Dr. Starsky Wilson.
Friends, leaders, colleagues, students, fellow alum of the Duke University community, President Price, to the administrators, to all who have had some part in putting together this unique occasion to honor the life, the legacy, the ministry of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in this unique and even tumultuous time of transition in American life. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for your nurture and hospitality and encouragement during my time at Duke and the Divinity School. Thank you for pausing to provide a space and time of reflection, all so necessary in this unique moment of transition. President Price and to other leaders, I'm grateful for this invitation. I bring you greetings from here in the nation's capital in Washington, D.C., from the rooted home of the Children's Defense Fund on behalf of all of our staff across the country, our board of directors, those who seek to serve a mission toward an America where marginalized children flourish, where leaders prioritize their well-being, and where communities have the power to assure they thrive. We stand as an institution rooted and founded out of the roots of the civil rights tradition by Marian Wright Edelman. And so we are glad to be here on this occasion with each and every one of you. As we reflect on the legacy of King in this moment, I'd like to be the Baptist preacher that I am and lean on King's Baptist preaching legacy, respecting the theme of voices of the movement. I'd like to speak of the collection of voices in this particular moment. A particular collection I'd like to focus on is one that may have inspired King, but also given him some work to do. The collection of the children gathered, centered even, in the Birmingham Crusade of 1963. As you may recall, as King worked then with Fred Shuttlesworth to respond to the indignities of segregation, embodied by Bull Connor there in that county, there in that area in Birmingham, Alabama, James Bevel had the idea that the appropriate thing to do, because so many people were being locked up, so many people were being taken off the streets, so much energy was being given to the campaign against this Commissioner of Public Safety and this American sign of segregation, that they needed an ongoing and unrelenting and a constant flow of champions for justice and civil rights. And when they needed an ongoing, ever-present flow of leaders coming into the movement, they decided to turn to the children. The Children's Crusade provided a great resource for the Birmingham campaign. It provided a context of moral authority for who we were fighting for, whom we are fighting for, those who will inherit our work and our legacy. And King, in the midst of the Birmingham campaign, was prevailed upon by Jim Bevel to center children in the context of the crusade. This is ever present with me as I think about the work for children in America, and as I think about how much that campaign took out of King. It took so much from him, in fact. He had to rely on one of the things that preachers do every now and then. I'll tell a bit of a preacher's secret, if that's okay. He had to go so consumed by the campaign, so consumed by its energies, that when he had the occasion to preach back in Atlanta in the period in late 1962, early 1963, as he was thinking about preparing for and engaging in the Birmingham campaign, he didn't have the time he normally had to write out a full, fresh, new manuscript of a sermon. So he reached back to his days at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery. He reached back to old manuscripts. He reached back to 1959 for a sermon that he had titled at that moment, Unfulfilled Hopes, to revise and reprise it for 1963, because there were so many other things going on in the midst of this campaign. And in 1963, as he began those revisions, he also retitled the sermon From Unfulfilled Hopes to Shattered Dreams. This moment, I'd like to talk about a shattered dream. King, in that sermon, found his grounding in the 15th chapter of Romans, where an apostle Paul, who is still working on his journeys, has a desire and a hope, an aspiration to preach, of course, among a group of Christians gathered at Rome, the center of the world at the time. But he had extended hopes to preach the gospel, to take the message that had been placed in his heart to what he understood to be the end of the known world, to Spain. He said in the 24th verse of that chapter, King James Version says, whensoever I take my journey to Spain, I will come to you. He tells the people gathered at Rome, whenever, it's almost as if he's sheltering in place, whenever I get to travel again, I'll come by and see you. Now, how many times have we said that to our friends over Zoom and family members over FaceTime over the course of the last year? Whenever I get to travel again, I'm going to come to see you. The challenge for Paul, biblical scholars know, the challenge for Paul is that he never made it to Spain. The challenge for Paul, and King focuses on this, he makes it to Rome, but not to preach. He makes it there in shackles. He makes it there as a prisoner. He has great hopes for the proclamation of liberation and salvation among a community, but he makes it to that community shackled and imprisoned in a small cell. He doesn't see the streets of this great community. Rather, he sees the inside of the prison. This arrests King in the midst of the Birmingham campaign. He reprises this to share with his community in Atlanta because he sees Paul's hope. He sees Paul's desire. He sees Paul's vision of sharing a message of liberation as one of many shattered dreams. I appreciate this in this moment because on January 6th, as I sat with my 12-year-old son watching television here in our new home in Washington, D.C., just a few miles from the Capitol, just right up a straight shot from where we are living as we transition to this city. I wondered what was going on in the heart and the mind of my 12-year-old son as he watched those who were called to serve and protect respond to 2,000 people who claim to be gathered to save America, actually invading and intruding into a symbol of the American dream. The peaceful transition of power is a symbol of the American dream of continuous and inclusive participatory democracy. I wondered what that did to him, but more so as I saw him reacting and responding, as I heard him the next day virtually in school talking about the event with his friends. I recognized something else was going on with and in him. There was an evolution of a break down of the symbols of the American dream. Like any cultural phenomenon or any cultural reality, the American dream is really more than anything else a set of symbols. The interpretation of those symbols, a set of promises and commitments that collectively a people can assent to. A critical element of that set of symbols and commitments was, of course, the peaceful transfer of power. But there were others. There is, in the context of the American dream, even though we have made ourselves quite comfortable with the concept of people in poverty, we've made ourselves quite comfortable with 2 in 5 Black and brown children living in poverty. We have made ourselves quite comfortable with the idea of Hispanic children and Latinx communities living being 10 times more likely to live in food insecure homes. Although we are very comfortable with this poverty, we have and hold a notion of economic mobility. We believe that you ought to be able, if you studied hard and defer gratification, we believe you ought to be able to live a life better than your parents. Economic mobility is centered in the idea of the American dream. But when we pay attention to the scholarship of people like Raj Chetty of Harvard University on economic mobility, we do understand that millennials are the first generation that will not do better than their parents. And we also understand that we've not built the public will to provide the wage and wealth supports for the accumulation of assets to help them to do better. We know that one thing that helps children do better than their parents is resources, yet we have not marshaled the will for universal basic income, or marshaled the will for child allowances, or marshaled the will to make permanent the kinds of relief that equalizes the humanity of children and adults with COVID relief, as we can make that permanent on an ongoing basis. We've not marshaled that will, and so a critical to the centered idea of the American dream, economic mobility, is a shattered peace. It didn't begin with a peaceful transfer of power. It didn't begin with economic mobility. We can also recognize that when young people, children like the young lady over my shoulder this summer in Minneapolis, had to stand mask over her mouth and nose in the midst of a memorial for George Floyd, proclaiming with an upraised fist that her humanity should be cared for by an America who is paying attention while they sat sheltered in place at home. That the idea of equal access to the cover, to the protection, to rights under the law is an element of the American dream that now sits as a shattered piece. What happened on January 6th that I saw happening with my son is not that many dreams were broken, but one. The concept of the American dream was shattered into 74 million pieces. 74 million for the number of children in America under the age of 18. And 2020 also was the first year that those children in America were majority children of color. As we consider the shattered dream that is the concept of America, as we consider the end of innocence about the idea of America, we must consider what we must do next. As that campaign came to a close in 1963, King sat down to reflect upon it in what many call his most eloquent writing, in a book entitled Why We Can't Wait. In that book, King began to lift up, and he centered, of course, his famed epistle, the letter from the Birmingham jail, and he began to respond to react to something I believe we should be mindful of in this moment, on this moment between the precipice, on the precipice of a new presidential administration, but falling after the shattering of the American dream of a peaceful transfer of power with the actions in the Capitol on January 6th. He was concerned that people would be okay getting back to normal. He was concerned that people would accept incrementalism. I lift his words, not my own. Gradualism and moderation are not the answer to the great moral indictment, which the revolution of 1963 finally came to stand in the center of our national stage. If I might engage in the reprising, revising activity of a Baptist preacher and take previous words in the moment in the interest of expedience to make the point, I revise King's words this way. Gradualism and moderation are not the answer to the great moral indictment which, in the revolution, in the pandemic, in the uprising and the insurrection of 2020 and early 2021, finally came to stand in the center of our national stage. I say this as I prepare to bid you adieu. Getting back to normal, accepting incrementalism in this moment, being okay with things just being okay, not holding people accountable and not swinging for the fences of a transformation of society, not doing that is our call. We must, in this moment, hear King's call for a radical revolution of values with the understanding, as he said, that that kind of revolution transforms institutions. We must, in this moment, accept a child-focused, equity-infused public policy agenda that is ambitious at New Deal era levels. We must accept no less than the fulfillment of the promises of institutions of high rank, of philanthropies, and even universities like our own that stood in the midst of the uprisings of last summer and made commitments to Black life and racial justice that are yet to be fulfilled. And we cannot accept that going back to not having insurrectionists or terrorists at the Capitol is okay. We must rather take this moment to stand and to say we will put back together the pieces of the American dream, but we won't use crazy glue. We can't use crazy glue. We've got to remember that King said to us as he was preparing to depart in some of his last works that we have inherited a great World House. We, people of diverse backgrounds of station. We, people of different gendered identities and sexual orientations. We, people from across the globe, have inherited one house to live in, and we've got to figure out how to live in it as brothers and sisters, as kin, as cousins. We must learn to live as primos. And as I connect with you, me primos, I've got to ask you not just to consider the realities of our own tradition, but consider those from others. As we seek to put back the shattered pieces of the American dream, I want us to reach and learn from the tradition in Japan, an artistic concept used many times in pottery called kinzuki. Kinzuki art is when one takes broken pieces in order to put something together. The key is we don't put it together in a way that seeks to cover up that which has been done in the past. In this form of pottery and art, we put things back together using lacquered and gold mixture that holds the pot together, that pulls it in together in a way that actually draws attention to the cracks from the pieces. By drawing attention to the cracks in the pieces, we remind ourselves of the places where we were broken before. We tell ourselves, we memorialize the challenges in the spaces where we have fallen down, and we remember how to put things back together again. King's beloved community vision is not an American dream that has been seamlessly put back together. It is rather a multiracial, multicultural community of peace and justice with love as the governing ethic, and that does not seek to forget. Rather, it desires to remember. Remember what the desires and the hopes of the moment were when we were sheltered in place. We said to our kin, when I get to travel again, I'll come by and see about you. Remember the pain on the face of that young person who makes our heart flutter when we had to explain to them what was going on in the nation's capital, and for some of them have to say very truly that this nation does not demonstrate a care for you. Remember the feeling in our own hearts when our own hopes were dashed. Remember that the American dream has been shattered. But because America never was America to me, but because it was a concept and a hope in the first place, but it is still yet to be revealed, the challenge of its shattering is not fatalistic. Rather, it is a call for all of us to pick up one of those broken pieces, the one that is nearest to us. Pick up the broken piece in the heart of one of those 74 million children. Pick up the broken piece that is fallen in your neighborhood and pull back together the best of your lacquer. Pull back the gold, the most precious of your circumstances and elements. Put it where that broken piece is and connect it to someone else's. It is time for us to put back together the pieces of the American dream. This is King's call for 2021, not to be happy with going back to the normal that was killing our children, not to be happy to go back to that which divided, but to put back the pieces in a way that we can remember how we were broken. And in doing so, we might live faithfully the call to beloved community. We might live faithfully into our unfulfilled hopes. And we might indeed live what King later centered as an appropriate reality and new American dream. Blessings to you. I'm grateful for the opportunity. And when we can travel again, I'll come by and see you in Durham. Peace.
I begin in the name of God, who created all things. I seek refuge in God from the dangerous hatred that emerges from human beings. We seek your protection from angry tweets, criminal posts,
and hurtful memes. We ask you, O Lord, guide us, put us on the path to achieve that elusive dream, the one articulated by Dr. Martin Luther King, that dream that one day this nation would rise up and live by its own creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all of us are created equal. Let's act like we're on the same team. But what does it mean? After all these years, I'm having the same unfulfilled, recurring dream. A recurring theme is that mankind takes politics and religion to extremes. Help us, God. Purify our souls. Make our hearts clean. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, which means all praise be to God, the Lord of everything. Amen and Ameen.